everybody, and welcome to Wednesday. It's nice to have you here. Boy, do I have a full show. I got to get going right away, or I will not fit it all in. Let's start here. I kind of thought I'd be done with Epstein a long time ago. I am not done with Epstein. As it turns out, we are not done with Epstein, because, you know, the whole digital fuss with that video that the DOJ said was proof that nothing to see here. Oh, yeah, there's nothing to see outside his cell. Turns out, maybe not so much, because digitally speaking, looks like there's stuff called metadata that matters. Yeah, this. Apparently it was screwed with. And that's not me talking, it's the science. It's the digital science. Tonight, we're going to talk about drilling down on the digital science to find out what exactly is missing and what was stitched together in this video, and what does it tell us and what does it not tell us. And I'm also going back a little further to that hyoid bone in Jeffrey Epstein's neck, because now I'm starting to see it in a whole new light. I'm going to tell you all about that with 3 reasons tonight. 3 reasons why that may not have been a suicide. Also, today, something came to light that I didn't expect. Kind of thought that all of us were waiting with bated breath for the gag order in the Idaho quadruple murder case to be lifted. Kind of expected it would be lifted at least by next week when the sentencing of Bryan Kohberger happens. Both the prosecutors and the defense attorneys agreed at his plea hearing that there's no reason to keep these details under a gag order anymore. So who was it? I want to know, who was it who's filed a motion saying, oh, I think we should. I think it should stay sealed. Because somebody did. I'm going to tell you about that, and I'll tell you what the resolution looks like it might be, because we are like hours away from some kind of resolution there. And a lot of mysteries that we would really like answered as to why this monster took away 4 innocent, beautiful children who he didn't even know. That's coming up. And then it's not often that just a everyday attempted kidnapping makes it on the air on a national show. Unless, of course, that attempted kidnapping turned into a kidnapping that ended up on video with audio, that ended up with police saying, I want everybody across the nation to look at this woman as the gold standard of what you need to do if anybody ever grabs you. Take a look. Lest you think that he knew her? That would never happen to me. That's got to be something between those 2 people. He did not know her. He robbed her store and then decided to steal her. So I will tell you exactly what it is that she did, that the cops are saying, boy, oh boy, I hope everybody follows her lead if they find themselves in that boat. Let me start here. Who would have ever thought that Jeffrey Epstein, of all people, would bring together mortal enemies in the blood sport that we call politics, with the still murky details of his own pathetic death back in 2019. It used to be, not that long ago actually, that the left and the right could always find common ground in America on things like international relations or, you know, the civil service or maybe even elections. But now that common ground seems to be how Epstein died and whether or not a rich and well-connected pedophile sex trafficker really did hang himself in his jail cell. 3 successive administrations have said that's exactly what happened. But still, there are legions of people on both sides of the aisle who believe that Epstein was strangled inside that jail cell to shut him up and to keep him from releasing big names, big, important people who may have been a part of his sick tendency to surround himself with young girls and then pass them around to his friends for sex after he himself had had them for sex. And when I say legions of people, I mean more and more people than ever before seem to be convinced that Epstein was murdered, not that he took his own life. Especially because of the way the current administration has been making the case that Epstein killed himself. Case closed, nothing to see here. And frankly, I am more than happy to leave the politics to any other show that wants to cover it, because I myself am here for the mystery. This is a hell of a true crime mystery on our hands. And tonight we've uncovered 3 big reasons to suspect that Epstein's sudden and untimely end may not exactly have been his idea. The first is what a former inmate told us about that same jail cell, right? At the Metropolitan Correctional Center, because that inmate himself was in that cell, the same cell. Michael Francis was a capo for the Colombo crime family back in the 1980s, and he did time in the very same cell where Jeffrey Epstein was later housed. He said on this show, there is no way that Epstein could have done what the authorities claim he did, killed himself.
I did 8 years in prison, and I haven't experienced cameras being broken in the perfect storm of correctional officers not walking those cells. They walk in and they look in on you all the time. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's embarrassing to go to the toilet because they're walking past you and looking in the cell constantly. So I've said this from day one. I do not believe it was suicide. I can't talk about what happened to him, but I don't believe it was a suicide because you just couldn't physically do it. It would be almost impossible.
A second reason for suspicion about the whole suicide theory comes from this, what you're looking at, not me, other side. The digital forensics from that newly released surveillance video outside of Epstein's jail cell. It was supposed to prove once and for all that nobody went in or out of Epstein's cell on his last night alive. But some new forensic analysis shows that the video was not raw video, as the DOJ insists it was, but that it was instead edited video. Very different, and may in fact have been manipulated. So-called metadata, right? It shows all that footage that the feds made public for the first time last week was created at 4:48 p.m. on May 23rd of this year, and that it was last modified at 8:16 p.m., very same day. The user who created the video file and made the changes to the video file is listed as MJ Cole 1. MJ Cole 1. And what sort of changes did MJ Cole 1 make? The metadata shows that the final cut was actually 2 video clips. 2. Stitched together. And one of the original clips was almost 3 minutes longer than it is in the public version that the DOJ released. I'm joined now by the expert I always call when I have to use the word metadata. Jake Green is a digital forensics expert and the technical operations manager at Invista Forensics. He's among several private experts who've analyzed the Epstein video. Jake, thank God you are back on the show. There seems to be so much confusion. At first, when this video, raw video, was released, everybody went bananas saying, oh, a minute and 2 seconds was missing. And then the DOJ said, oh, no, it's always like that. It's just the way the camera resets. And suddenly, more experts have weighed in saying it's more like 3 minutes of video is kind of missing, or at least not there, or manipulated. Can you explain this in lay people's terms?
Really, it's difficult to. So when we think of raw data, that's something that since I've come into the private sector and started asking law enforcement and the government for raw data, oftentimes our first level of prosecutors do not know what raw data is, and most lay people don't. Raw data is something that is in a forensically reliable format, meaning that we can go in and review it and confirm that it matches the original. What has been produced in this case is what you could consider as work product. This is not the original. This is a child of the original. There's so many issues with this video. The minutes missing, the jumps. We can sometimes see a cursor move in the top right corner. There's so many pieces wrong with this video, and for the DOJ to release it, it's strange, and it's kind of unnerving to know that this is the way they want to do this.
It sounds kind of dopey, actually, when you say what you said about the cursor being seen up on the top, because as we all know, surveillance cameras don't have cursors. So is there Is there any way that I'm making a mountain out of a molehill? Is there any way that it's just normal to take a surveillance camera and then have a human download it and have a human send it off to the DOJ and then have the DOJ as humans send it out to us, and that's what we're really seeing?
So actually, I don't think the first part of what you said happened. I don't think that this was a download from a surveillance system. I think this was what we call a screen capture. This is just a copy of a video of a video. So somebody went in with some type of software to actually record what the screen was showing. It's not in a reliable format. It may be reliable as to what was on the screen, but it cannot be confirmed to match what was originally recorded. So I think that's really what we're seeing here is just, it truly is the work product of FBI going in and attempting to change and alter and perhaps try to enhance the video, but it's clearly not the original.
That's very upsetting to hear the words altered. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, tried to explain it away when the first uproar, shook the internet, that there was a minute and 2 seconds, missing, and she seemed to be very clear that that's normal. Every night, the video system resets right before midnight, and that 1 minute and 2 is just normally gone. Did that sit well with you? Could that be legitimate? Is that part of this problem, or is it really very little to do with the problem that we now see, this larger stitched together with 3 minutes somehow kind of not there?
It makes it stink even worse. There are computers that sometimes we do have to do scheduled restarts to ensure that we're running the correct software. We're running updates for our security. But for a network attached video storage unit, like if this is what it truly came from, you wouldn't want it to shut down for at least a minute every night. And then definitely don't want it to do the same minute every night, especially if word gets out about that. Then you've got a complete minute every day of the year that you're not going to have video for.
Let me ask you about this username. I hadn't heard it before, the second uproar about the raw video release. MJ Cole 1. MJ Cole 1. I'm shocked that smart people like you are able to even see a username that was mussing about with this video. But is it super obvious? Like, was this just all thumbs at the DOJ, sending this out to Attorney General Pam Bondi and making her look like, for lack of a better word, an idiot? Because MJ Cole 1 apparently is quite obvious.
So MJ Cole, I hope, is a digital forensic analyst, somebody that works with surveillance video that was trying to produce a work product. So whether it was truly a work product or they think it is or think it's the original, there's no way to tell. But MJ Cole is a shortened Windows username. So it could be short for MJ Coleman, any other last name that has C-O-L-E at the beginning. So there's really no way to tell with what we have now. But that is something that we see in Windows systems for when we see a shortened username.
Is there any chance that the edit, the manipulation, the changes were just done automatically? Like, I know when we talk about the programs, it sounds like that's a human throwing video in and messing with it. But is there any way that you can see that this is all just much ado about nothing, that technically speaking, this could have happened in transfers and there's nothing nefarious about it?
So with what we're seeing now, we can say rather definitively that this is not within the realm of digital forensics best practices. Doing a screen capture of a surveillance system is our last resort in every case that we ever work. We would want to preserve the entirety of that server if that's what it's backing up to. We'd want to preserve the VHS tape if that's how old the system was. But in order to do that, we have to follow any type of forensics crime scene. We want to ensure that we're preserving evidence. So if we're just grabbing a screen capture, we're leaving behind so much data.
Well, that's distressing, and I kind of had a feeling that it wasn't going to feel satisfactory, although I absolutely love interviewing you. Jake Green, thanks so much for this. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ashleigh.
All right, folks, if you were paying attention earlier, you know that I said there were 3 reasons to suspect that Jeffrey Epstein may have been murdered, but I only gave you 2. And the reason is that number 3 is a detail from Epstein's autopsy. His injuries included fractures of the left and right thyroid cartilage at the front of the neck, as well as the left hyoid bone. Hyoid bone is a U-shaped bone that sits just under your jaw. and it serves as an anchor for your tongue. The experts say it is uncommon to see those types of fractures after a hanging. They're far more likely to be caused by a manual strangulation. Now, I'm not going to suggest for a moment that you mimic the difference between a hanging, which is sort of a vertical pressure, right, under your chin, as opposed to a lateral pressure, which is usually strangulation. Don't do it, because I have Dr. Michelle Dupree here. She's a former medical examiner, retired forensic pathologist, and a former law enforcement officer. All right, Doc, I've talked about this before, but it just sort of bears repeating, given that we're getting more forensic information about this very confusing scene at the MCC. The hyoid bone on Jeffrey Epstein was broken. It's not as though other hangings haven't produced a broken hyoid bone. It's just rare in this kind of hanging, because as I understand it, he was hanging forward, meaning he used the sheet to tie it around his neck and then sort of tipped forward as opposed to vertically hanging. Did I explain that right? And if I did, does it sound like it's silly to think that a 66-year-old man has a broken hyoid bone from that kind of hanging?
Ashleigh, you're absolutely right. You did an excellent job. And we don't see the hyoid bone broken in most hangings. In fact, we don't see a lot of broken bones in hangings at all. And when we do, they're definitely not in that location. They're more at the C2 or C3 location. The hyoid bone is almost pathognomonic for manual strangulation. And only about, I did some research on this, maybe 6% of cases is the hyoid bone ever broken in a hanging. And that's not the only thing. There are many, many other questions, in fact, more questions than answers. He was found, as I understand it, sitting. He was not even suspended. There's not enough force. He didn't drop down and hang himself. He was basically sitting when this happened, or sitting on the floor or touching the floor, again, not suspended. There's not quite enough force to do the amount of damage that is described in the autopsy report. That's very disconcerting. I don't understand some of this. This raises an awful lot of questions.
Let me ask you this. I am certainly not an expert in your field, but I've done a bit of reading, kind of macabre stuff, but older people might actually break the hyoid bone in a way that younger people might not. Could that be an explanation for why Jeffrey Epstein's hyoid bone was broken, because he was 66?
I'm not saying that it's impossible, but usually when we think of someone older like that, we think of really old, maybe in their 80s, and that comes from calcification. It didn't appear, and I have not read the autopsy report, and I have not seen photos, so I'm at a bit of a disadvantage. But I don't think that sounds very likely. No, I wouldn't think that would be the cause of it.
That's the other thing. You probably haven't seen photos because they didn't take any, which I find, you know, in my business, there's always photos of a crime scene. There's always photos of a suspicious scene. There were no photos of Jeffrey Epstein in his cell. Is that protocol because it was a jail? Does that seem legitimate to you, or does that seem highly unusual?
Actually, that is highly unusual. Deaths in custody are something that we really don't like. I mean, we try to stick exactly by the book on those, because those are very serious cases when there is a death in custody. Everything should be done by the book. There are always scene photographs, whether it's in the jail cell or whether it's out in the field. It doesn't matter. Photographs are taken at the scene to document how the victim was found. That can tell us so much information. And in this case, we have a lot of unanswered questions.
Boy, do we ever. I'm going to have you back. Dr. Michelle Dupree, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Coming up next, it was the last thing anybody expected, that Bryan Kohberger would choose to skip his own trial on quadruple murder and instead plead guilty. But lest you think that we will never learn all those details that would have come from the witness stand or from the evidence, think again. There's another pitched battle to keep the gag order in place. And yet again, it may be coming from Kohberger, although we are not exactly sure who it is who wants it all to stay under wraps. I'll explain it all coming up next. 1 week from today, a confessed maniacal killer will return to an Idaho courtroom to formally hear that he'll spend the rest of his natural life behind bars with no chance for parole or appeal. And I, for one, am betting that Bryan Kohberger never thought that he'd be in this boat when he savagely decided to kill 4 innocent strangers at the University of Idaho. But before we watch as he is led away to start serving the rest of his life in a lockup, there's been some curious action in the case just this week. Somebody has made yet another appeal to keep the gag order in this case in place. The motion is sealed, naturally, so we don't know who it is making the request, but both the prosecution and the defense lawyers agreed during Kohberger's plea hearing that neither side had any issues with the gag order being lifted. In any case, just hours from now, the same judge who took Kohberger's guilty plea under oath is going to be taking up the issue of the gag order. As a reminder, it has been in place for more than 2 years, and it's blocked almost all information about the case from being released. It's also blocked every official involved in the case from ever speaking a word about it. And here's an annoying factoid from the Associated Press. Of the more than 450 motions that are filed in the Kohberger case, over half of them have been motions to seal information. Mostly the reason being to protect the potential jury pool from hearing too much information before the case and then being poisoned, right? Well, now, guess what? There's no need for that, right? No jury, can't be poisoned. So it's not clear what, if anything, the judge is going to decide to do about this gag order. But some non-officials who have been a part of this case literally from the very first few hours that the crime was committed, they are speaking publicly now. A docuseries streaming on Amazon Prime features interviews with the parents and the siblings of 2 of the murdered students. It also features interviews with 3 close friends of the victims and their surviving roommates, friends who were there the morning of the murders, there when the bodies were discovered. One of the friends being the young man who actually made the discovery of the horrors inside 1122 King Road and then said, call 911 and get the hell out of here. They are telling stories that we've never heard before. The documentary is called One Night in Idaho. The parents who are speaking are Maddie Mogan's mom and her stepdad, Karen and Scott Laramie, and Ethan Chapin's mom and dad, Stacy and Jim Chapin, along with Ethan's 2 triplet brother and sister. Some of the friends interviewed in the documentary are Hunter Johnson, Emily Allen, and Josie Lateran. I want you to hear how they first heard about the horrors at King Road when roommate Dylan Mortensen called them in a panic.
Something weird happened last night. I don't really know if I was dreaming or not, but I'm really scared. Can you come check out the house? I was like, sure. Should I bring my pepper spray? Not thinking anything of it.
I lived with Emily at the time, and then I remember her being like, oh yeah, let's go to Xana's. Dylan wants us to come over. She's called us before and been like, oh, I'm scared, can you bring your boyfriends over? But like, not like, it was never anything serious. Like, it was just like a pan fell. Like, actually nothing, because it's Moscow. Then we were like, oh yeah, we'll just go over and Hunter, and he'll just check it out.
I don't think I've ever locked a single door in Moscow. When Dylan had called, I didn't think it was urgent. So I started walking to Xana's house, and when we got there, Dylan and Bethany had exited the house. They, frightened, just kind of like, just hands on their mouth, like, I don't know what's going on type thing. When I was going up the stairs, Hunter Johnson was already in the house. We were just a bit behind.
As soon as I stepped in the house, I was like, oh, something is so not right. Like, you could feel it almost. The stairs are immediately when you walk in the door to the left. And then you walk upstairs, and there's the living room, And then all the way down the hall is Anna's room. Hunter was ahead of me and Emily and immediately was pushed out. And Hunter was like, get out, somebody call 911.
Yeah.
Hunter had enough courage to tell them to call the police for not a real reason. He worded it very nicely. He said, tell them there's an unconscious person. Hunter saved all of us extreme trauma by not letting us know anything.
Maddie Mogan's mother, Karen Laramie, she told the filmmakers about her desperate visit to the Moscow, Idaho Police Department after she had heard that there was a murder at her daughter Maddie's off-campus home, but she didn't know about her daughter. Take a look.
So we got to the police department. I remember running up the stairs and just trying to find anyone to talk, like anyone to just anyone. And finally they put us in a little room and they came into the back door and kind of opened this file. And the officer kind of explained, there has been a homicide in your daughter's house. And there are 4 victims. And instantly we were like, what? It just made no sense. And he said, Maddie was a victim. And then I said, what about Kaylee? He said, Kaylee was also a victim.
I just remember just being so angry. I was like, this can't be true. I mean, this is Idaho. I mean, where things like this, you see it on TV, you know, East Coast or something like that, and then we found out about the other 2, and it's like, what is going on here? This is ridiculous. This is unbelievable. This is like, no.
With the unknown killer still on the loose and police holding back virtually every single detail about what had happened at that home, the internet did what it does. Stirred up a vortex of speculation along with horrible, reckless accusations. One of Ethan Chapin's fraternity brothers and one of the last people to see Ethan alive put it this way.
My Facebook inbox was full of just the worst, most heinous things I have ever read. People said I had conspired to commit this murder from high school. Somebody had sent a photo of my house, the cars that we drove, the places of employment of my parents. Now people know my address and saying I have something to do with it. I was once again fearing for my life, but for a completely different reason.
6 weeks later, the world would hear the name of the man that police believed was the killer. The suspect was a student from a neighboring college, Washington State University, a name that the victim's friends all said they'd never even heard before. Bryan Kohberger? Who was that? And 2.5 years later, we would all finally hear the truth. He wasn't just a suspect. He was indeed a cold-blooded, psychotic murderer. Though why he picked these 4 kids and did this unspeakable thing, that may yet remain a mystery unless that gag order is lifted and it fills in those blanks. Quick break, but coming up next, we go live to New Orleans, where, believe it or not, there is still a massive search underway for one of those 10 inmates who busted out of the city jail months ago. 2 months, to be exact. But how long can this man stay on the run? I've got an update on the manhunt, and also today, state prosecutors formally charge a man who worked inside that jail with knowingly helping the jailbreakers. What did this man do that officials say allowed 10 jailbirds to fly the coop? His attorney joins me live next. It was 2 months ago today that 10 inmates escaped from the overbooked and rundown New Orleans jail. And if you're counting, one of those fellas is still on the loose. That guy, Derek Groves, and he's the baddest inmate of the lot. Convicted of killing 2 people with an assault rifle during a beef between drug dealers. So, yeah. And if you're listening out there, Derek, the cops say they are never, ever going to give up looking for you. In the meantime, a guy named Sterling Williams is locked up tight with bail north of $1 million. You might remember that Mr. Williams is a former jail maintenance worker, accused of making the breakout possible by turning off the water supply and allowing the cons to move a wall-mounted toilet without flooding the whole place and sending out red flags. This week, he was formally charged with 10 counts of, quote, principal to simple escape, end quote, and 1 count of malfeasance in office, although I highly doubt that this guy had an actual office because he was the janitor. Michael Kennedy is Sterling Williams' attorney, and he is back on the program tonight. It's good to have you back. Thank you so much for coming. Okay, so 11 charges. 10 of them are principal to simple escape for the 10 guys, and 1 of them is malfeasance in office. But I'm starting to hear that your defense is not that the original story, which I heard, this poor guy said he was going to be shanked by the inmates if he didn't do this thing, that it was, I think, Antoine Massey who threatened him to do this, or else he'd be on the business end of the shank. Now I'm hearing, no, he did it. He turned off the water, but for a whole other reason. When did all that change?
That changed immediately upon him being arrested and me being appointed. We've addressed that. I'm happy to go into it again. He stated that Mr. Massey threatened to shank him. That was not a directive. That was not turn off the water or I'll shank you. That was jailhouse banter. And honestly, if you don't spend a lot of time in the jail, I don't know how else to explain that that's okay, other than every job has its own vernacular. And if you're going to work around violent inmates, that's something you're used to hearing people say. He reported that during his interview because it is something that was stated to him, but it was misconstrued as being the reason he turned off the water. He turned off the water because they had flooded the toilet, and that's his job.
So there was an overflowing toilet in another cell prior to all of this happening, and your client turned off the water because of that? Is there any proof or any witnesses who gave him that official directive from the prison to turn off the water? Because my thought is that he'd have had to been given a directive to do that by somebody with authority.
He was the jail plumber. He entered the tier. There was a toilet that had been stuffed full of jail clothing, towels, etc., forcibly overflowed. In order to clear it, he was forced to turn off the water. That's his job. We do expect that evidence is going to prove that as soon as discovery is tendered.
So there's no guard or someone in authority who says, hey, Mr. Williams, get down to cell block, you know what, we got a problem and you need to, get busy doing the janitorial duties and shut off the water.
Well, think about it. There were also no guards to notice these men rip a toilet apparatus out of the wall, cut the bars, cut through another wall, go across a yard, up a 20-foot wall, down that same wall, and across the interstate. There were no guards to notice any of that. But by all means, let's blame the plumber.
No. I just want to get the straight scoop here. I think I'd heard something about a guard.
That's what the sheriff is doing, blaming the plumber. Where were the guards? Where were the deputies? Okay,
well, hold on. Let's just get the facts out. So your client, Sterling Williams, I had heard that a guard had told him, that his defense is going to be that a guard had told him to shut off the water. Is that true? Are you going to be asserting that defense in a court of law, that a guard told Sterling Williams to turn off the water because the cell was overflowing?
We are going to assert that Sterling is not guilty at his arraignment, and we are going to fight throughout the entirety of this case, no matter how long it takes. As to specifically what we're going to argue, obviously I'm not going to reveal that when it hasn't come time for that.
Totally understand that part, Michael Kennedy. I get that a lot on this show, but I sure appreciate you coming on again, and
Sure
I hope
you
you'll
do.
come back as this case continues. I do, I really do. So yeah, keep us posted on the case, and let's talk again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And just so our audience knows, there is a big delay digitally between myself and the guest. So it wasn't Michael Kennedy pausing before answering me that long. That's just, you know, TV bugaboos. Coming up next, if I tell you that a guy robs a smoke shop and tries to kidnap an employee, that sounds really scary. But if I show you what it's like when that happens, it's downright terrifying. This woman literally fought for her life. And now today, police are saying that she is setting the gold standard for how to fight off a bad guy and win. You're going to see the whole thing and how it resolved next. Nobody ever goes to work in the morning thinking they might be kidnapped. Most of us don't, anyway. But if the situation ever arises, the experts say, run if you can, fight if you can, and fight like your life depends on it. Just like this woman did a couple of weeks ago in St. Augustine, Florida, when a man burst into the smoke shop where she worked, robbed the place, and then decided he'd steal a human being too, her. Police say this kidnapper tried to make off with an armload of vapes and cigarettes, and that this woman, a dutiful employee, tried to stop him. Thank God a bystander overheard her screaming and then saw that ruckus and called 911. And before all of this had even happened, the kidnapper apparently stole a truck in Jacksonville, the same truck right there that he tried to use to kidnap the victim. Apparently also helped himself to some stolen merchandise at a Walmart, too. But, and this is a good one, later in the day, police say they spotted a suspect, 31-year-old Theodore Michael Tundidor. Florida Fish and Wildlife officer said that he was barreling down an interstate and that he fled when they tried to stop him. But he was subsequently caught, and now he's facing charges ranging from DUI to grand theft auto to kidnapping. And as for the victim who got away, the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office says that she did everything right. She fought, she screamed, and she ran like hell, and that she stands as an example for anyone watching tonight who might find themselves in that same circumstance. That, my friends, is how you survive. Coming up next, what looks like a job for a fashion policeman gets a hell of a lot more serious when the guy accessorizes with a gun and a knife. Surveillance cameras caught a man attempting to rob a donut shop, attempting to get away, and then my favorite part, getting caught and cuffed. The whole incident, including assault by cinnamon roll. No kidding. When we come back. A grown man wearing a straw hat, a green sundress, a hot pink sweater, and a G-string walks into a donut shop. And in a better world, that little setup would end with a punchline. But this one doesn't. It ends with gunshots, a tasing, and finally an arrest. First things first. This is Christopher Hall back in May, as seen on security video just released this week by the LAPD. Yeah, I'm with you. Clearly, he may have skipped the lesson on being inconspicuous when doing things like this. And yes, that is a rooster patch on front of his sun hat. So watch what I'm watching right here. He shows the cashier a gun after walking in, right? Then he puts his fingers to his lips as if to suggest to the cashier that the cashier needs to stay quiet. And then the next thing that's shown is a knife, all of this coming out of that backpack. Cashier then takes off, runs into the back. Suspect chases him back there, brandishes the gun, and then starts pistol whipping the poor cashier, right? The cashier sprays the suspect with pepper spray. That doesn't go over well. This guy gets mad and reaches for the nearest thing, which is a tray of cinnamon rolls. And you bet he grabs those cinnamon rolls and throws them at the cashier like that's going to make a difference. But the cashier decides to fight back, throwing money. I think maybe from the tip jar, I'm not sure. That's when the suspect thinks, well, maybe I'll grab the money and get out of here. But another employee comes in. They push a cart at this guy. He's pistol whipping, but at the same time thinking about grabbing the money on the floor, and it's slippery because, you know, cinnamon rolls. Cashier then, after pushing the cart, notices the guy decides to flee. He hits those workers with the gun and then runs out after slipping and falling. So then, police say Christopher Hall fled the store and hid out behind a nearby apartment building. That's when officers found him, and they see him on video actually pointing his gun right at them. So you know what happens when that happens. They fire, but they missed him. So then he jumps over the fence behind him, and that's when this next bit happens. Take a look.
Get down! Get down! Don't move! Don't move!
Tonight, Hall is charged with 2 counts of robbery, 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon, presumably the knife, since the gun turned out to be an airsoft replica. But I do say justice is sweet. Thanks for joining us. Cuomo's next.